of sense. Fantastic points touched upon. And certainly we have to keep changing with the times. It's not just the pedagogy and so on. Everything has to change with time that is related to education. So upfront, what I'll do is, I would like to zoom out, although the topic is on assessment and evaluation. I'll spend the first few minutes zooming out and ask ourselves where we are when it comes to education, what constitutes education, and so on. So the graphic that I show you here is not just to highlight the different components. Of course, you can relate to almost all the components. You have institute, you have teaching, then you have the technology, and then you have the self-learning part, libraries and peer education, and of course the assessment, evaluation and the quality checks. All these are absolutely integral components when it comes to education. One of the points that I want to make is every component of this schematic that you see here has to undergo a change. And when one component changes, all the other components have to adjust, just like I'm always reminded of the barber. When he cuts the hair and you ask him, "Yahan par thoda zyada hai kaato," he will do it, but he will also trim everywhere else. Right? But that is exactly the philosophy that we have to follow and say that, yes, if I make changes, let us say, to assessment, then it cannot be just a standalone change in the assessment or evaluation and so on. You heard in the morning talk, I request the administrators to help teachers take risks, which means that the institute has to make some policy changes to accommodate whatever changes you make to the teaching or the assessment or to the peer education library and so on. We will not have the time, of course, to talk about every component of this, and that's not anyway the focus of this talk. But we cannot talk about assessment and evaluation alone without talking about some of these components. So you will see gradually, as I start with assessment and evaluation, we'll get into the other components as well, so that a tighter integration happens. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to implement any of the changes that we plan to make. And the other point that I want to make, which of course we will not have the time to talk about, one of the most left out or the outdated components that we think of today's library, right? Today, as I said, I always say, this is summer season now for most part of India. Libraries have become nice AC halls for students to sleep, right? Because hostels necessarily don't have ACs. So you just go in the afternoon, have a good nap and come back. If possible, sleep on the book so that some learning happens. But this is the unfortunate view that we have about libraries. In a couple of other talks at other forums, I have talked about how libraries have to also reinvent and realign themselves so that they also actually become indispensable in the modern world. We'll not talk about that today necessarily, but if you have a question later on, I would be happy to answer. Okay, so when we talk of excellence in education, there are so many factors that obviously I'm not going to read all of this. That's not the point. There are several things that we have to worry about, and very often we think of excellence, we equate excellence to performance. How many students have actually passed the exam? How many students have secured marks in the top 100, top 90 percentile and so on? I wouldn't actually think of it that way. Excellence in education means a lot more, right? Apart from securing marks, obviously all of us agree that they have to graduate as good, responsible, ethical citizens. And beyond that, there is one more point, which is that once they graduate either from the school or from the university, they should have identified their strengths. Even if they have discovered that they got into, let us say, chemical engineering, and they have discovered that chemical engineering is not for them, then, and in turn they have identified some other area, could be photography, could be music, it could be arts or whatever, that is where their strength is, then that should also be counted towards excellence in education. The question is our education system really geared towards that? is our education system facilitating such a self-realization? That is very, very important, right? Okay, so what I'll talk about is the ones that are highlighted in the board: continuous assessment for benchmark improvement and guidance, and that's exactly what is required if you want your students to self-realize. Guidance is an extremely important thing. And associated with that is our digitalization of resources, infrastructure, and technology enhancements. So let's plunge into assessment. See, I work in the area, in an area called, huge area called feedback control. And feedback control is at the heart of everything that we see around in our lives, including our human bodies, our temperature regulation, ACs, everywhere. You take any technology, man-made or natural, you will see feedback control. And all of us know that feedback is a very, very critical aspect of effective teaching and learning. So when you think of assessment, evaluation, guidance, feedback, then this is, in fact, somewhat a simplified schematic, I might say, but hopefully highlights the critical elements in the assessment and evaluation. So you have, of course, the learner, who is the focus, and you measure certain aspects of the learning process. That could be qualitative or quantitative, but first we have to really decide what to measure and so on. So let us say we have decided, we measure, and this measurement goes as feedback to two crucial players in this process: the teacher and the learner, right? The learner takes the feedback in his or her own way, and the teacher also takes the feedback with the help of an assessment and evaluation tool, and then the teacher decides what needs to be done with some, of course, very deep reflection and diagnosis and so on. So this is a process that continues. Of course, all of us understand what is the difference between assessment and evaluation and so on. Now, the measured variables could include both qualitative and quantitative. That's extremely important. Many a time we think everything should be quantified in terms of numbers. It doesn't have to be. And that is what, of course, the qualitative part is what we missed out during our online teaching. I couldn't see the face, and if there is no facial expression that I can see, then the feedback is really very, very low. And that is what we all were deprived of during COVID. So it was great to actually come back to in-person teaching, seeing the expression and reading the student's mind, and then re-strategizing your teaching on the spot is the mark of a great teacher, is the mark of a spontaneous teacher. Buddhism says the mark of an enlightened person is spontaneity. So you'll have to really look at the student and re-strategize. So there is always a fixed component in learning that you prepare offline, but there is also an evolving component every second as we are teaching, and we have all experienced that. So that qualitative feedback is very, very important. Not everything needs to be measured in numbers. Now, of course, we know that it could be both in class and offline and so on. The question that we want to really ask today and revisit today is, what do we measure? This is the first question. How do we assess and evaluate? And what are the remedial measures and making it learner specific? So there are these glaring things that we'll have to revisit in the wake of three things, I would say. Educational technologies that have come up, the societal changes that are happening, and thirdly, of course, the data science idea. I'll bring up another schematic a bit later to help us reflect on what changes have occurred in the educational ecosystem that forces us to relook at how we are assessing and evaluating, and what remedial measures we should be looking at. And very importantly, today we can afford to make this learner specific. In other words, personalizing, that is the word that makes its rounds, right? So first I'll focus on the current practices itself, right? Forget about the changes in the educational ecosystem. What is it, in my opinion, are the few shortcomings? And you don't have to really agree with me on this. But if you do disagree, let me know. So the first question, in fact, the first shortfall, we were discussing this at the dinner table yesterday. the biggest shortfall or deficiency in our assessment today is in not assessing whether the student or the learner is understanding our questions in the assessment. Okay, so if I ask a question, if I give a math question or a science question and so on, and the student is not answering, we worry about the answer all the time. And I'm saying, please focus on the question first. Did you ever ask if the student understood the question? Right? And a lot of times, in my own observation, with my students and with my children, I have seen, whenever my daughter has come to me or my son has come to me and said, I didn't answer this question, the first question that I ask is, did you understand the question? Did you really understand what was being given and what was being asked? If you are not able to segregate that in a question, then forget it, you will not be able to answer it. Everything else is fluke. Okay? And 90% of the times, amazingly, I have seen even among my students, they don't understand the question. Right? So then, of course, it's time for us to reflect and for them also to really break it up into smaller parts and then understand the question. But are we really assessing our students on that? That's the first thing we should be doing. Right? We are not doing that. Then, generally, right, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, assessments and evaluations are conducted at a class level. Of course, my education, my experience comes largely from higher education. I have not taught at the school level, but I have interacted with teachers at the school level, children at the school level, thanks to my 6 years of chairmanship at one of the schools on our campuses. So I had this opportunity of watching school children, school teaching in close quarters. So there is a difference. There is a difference between the demands of a school assessment and evaluation and the higher education, but there are some commonalities as well. I'll talk about a few of those things very soon. But largely speaking, we do our assessment and evaluations at a class level, and we may not get the time to zoom into the personal level. And today, I believe the AI tools can help you do that. Okay, so the other big shortfall, and this is again a point that I was making, in our assessment and evaluation is we are not evaluating or even assessing, forget about evaluating, we are not even assessing whether a child, whether a learner, forget about it, whether it's school education, higher education, I see this issue, we are not able to turn a descriptive problem that you have given into a problem that they can solve using the concepts that you have taught. Okay? So if you're teaching math and you're given a descriptive problem, they should be able to convert that to a math statement. If you're teaching physics and you're given a descriptive problem, they should be able to convert that to a physics problem and so on. Unfortunately, that is again a reiteration of the point that I made earlier. They are not able to first comprehend the question. And largely, I think it has got little to do with the proficiency in the language and more to do with a fear, with a lack of approach on how to understand a given problem. And believe me, today, this problem pertains at the highest level of research as well. So many of you may know, there are hundreds and hundreds of data science certification programs that run around. And hundreds of, truckloads of people with data science certificates graduate. But the industries whose employees are going into these certification programs, they complain constantly saying, our employees have data science certificates, but they don't know how to solve our problem. Again, the answer is, they do not know how to convert a real life problem to a data science problem. They only know how to solve a data science problem when it is actually expressed in the language, otherwise they do not know how to make the connect with the concept. So connecting context with the concept is an extremely important thing, and my own reading of the the origins of this goes back, I think, to the primary school level, where children go from number problems to descriptive problems in math. That is where the biggest barrier is, and that's it. Children stop taking interest in math. They say, I have no idea what this math problem has got to do with addition or multiplication, and so on. Okay, and a big part of it has got to do with also the way the math books are written today. I constantly say that math books look like English books more than math books today. Okay, it feels like I'm reading some nice stories after stories. Even the physics books are horribly written. Do this, do that. I mean, I see so many schematics, colored schematics. When I looked at my children's books over the last 10 years, I said, this is terrible. Somebody needs to tell these authors how to write the books. Okay? So, in an attempt to contextualize science, we have really gone overboard and concealed science to the extent that students don't see science and they're dreaming about when will I go to the shop to buy something and when will I go to the park to play swings and so on. Okay, so that is another issue. The other shortfall that I see is we do not know how to transform or translate the outcomes of our assessment and evaluation to what remedial measures that have to be taken. See, there are so many stakeholders today. It is not just the learners, it is also the parents, it is also the employers, everyone. Everyone needs to understand what this assessment and evaluation outcome is. And we are not really focusing on it. At a school level, of course, it's just the parents and the children. And parents have to be really educated. I'm sorry to use the word, but parents have to be educated on understanding the outcomes of an assessment and evaluation scheme. And I know that schools make attempts, but you see, parents are parents. They pay fee and they say, no, now magic has to happen and my child has to crack JEE all the time. Okay? But no, imagine if every child cracks JEE, then there will be, the world will become so one-dimensional that you don't want to live on this planet. Right. So, the larger concern, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is a changing education ecosystem, and I'll talk about that very soon. The competitive environment is also forcing many educational institutions to become over-ambitious, and as a result, it is forcing the systems and teachers to ignore the clear signs that emerge from the assessment and evaluation strategy. And if some assessment and evaluation outcome is showing that the child is, let us say, not doing well in physics, despite the best of efforts, then I don't think we go beyond that. We should actually say, it's okay, if the child is weak in physics, it's all right, no problem. The child is perhaps very good at carpentry. Great. The child is very good at English. Excellent. So, everybody doesn't have to excel in everything. Pagal ho jayenge. We'll go crazy. Okay. So, it is good that children excel in some things and are moderately good in other things. But that the school has to accept, the parents have to accept, and then only the child will be relieved of the pressure. If the system and the parents do not accept that, the child is under constant pressure, which is not at all good. The other factor is the variables that you are measuring, the expectations that you have, and the remedial measures of any assessment, evaluation, guidance scheme is strongly dependent on what strategy you are using for teaching and learning. If you teach in a particular way, in fact, on a lighter note, today we were trained to draw on a horizontal one, whatever we drew in the beginning. But यहाँ आया तो झटका लगा, इस vertical लगा दिया हमने board. अभी brush करो. Okay, I'm just giving a very light example. But the thing is, of course, the concept was taught to me by the art teacher, so I tried to use that concept and so on. I'm just giving that example that whatever teaching learning framework that you are adopting, your assessment, everything has to be tied, very, very important. When I teach, for example, I tell my students, and everybody knows in the institute, that I do not test them on run-of-the-mill problems, where a formula, plug and play, I will not necessarily do that. It's only a very small part of my assessment or evaluation. I will test the students on their ability to apply. Why? Because I'm teaching it that way. If I don't teach that way, then I don't have the right to do that. So please see if there is a synchrony, there is a synergy between how we teach and how and what we are assessing. If there is a gap, then it's going to be really bad. Okay, so there are other concerns of course, that we will talk about. But let us actually talk about. So there are only two major things that I'm going to talk about. One is, of course, a new learning framework based on perhaps about 20 to 25 years of my teaching at different levels and to different audiences. It's not just that I have taught only within the four walls of classroom. I've spoken to industry people, everybody. So based on all of that experience, I propose a simple, what I call as a panchakosha, or the 5-layered philosophy of learning/teaching. Of course, how you customize it to your needs is your choice, but this is, and please do give feedback on that. I'll be very happy to go back and make changes. This is the first thing that I'm going to talk about. And if you adopt this, then your assessment and evaluation also has to be changed accordingly. Then I'll talk about briefly how we can leverage AI and other things, and one very important thing called self-learning, which is very, very important today in the modern world. Okay, so what is this panchakosha, or the 5-layered learning that I believe in? Incidentally, if you turn to Yoga Shastra, I don't know how many of you have read, our body, any human being has 5 sheets or 5 layers is what Yoga Shastra says. The one that you see physically is called the Annamaya kosha, that is the physical body. And then you have the second layer called the Pranamaya kosha, the life layer, the life-giving layer. And the third one is the Manomaya, there's a mental layer around us. And the fourth one is the intellectual layer, the Jnanamaya kosha. And the fifth one is the bliss that you will hit when you have really gone into nice samadhi and so on. Not the Jiva Samadhi, not Samadhi after Vipassana. So here, if you look at the diagram, hopefully you are able to see from the back, the outermost layer is what I call as a survival layer. In this layer, essentially, what we teach, or what we should actually, what the learner is expected to know, is just the bare minimum of the subject. It could be physics, it could be science, it could be math, it could be biology, it doesn't matter. Bare minimum. You give a problem, the student is able to read the problem, understand and solve it, without necessarily knowing the underpinnings or the concepts, without knowing the life behind those methods. And the question is, how many of our students are in this layer? Ideally, I would say about 98% of our students, ideally 100%, but practically about 98 to 99% of the students in your class should be in this layer, and we have to strive to bring all the learners into this layer. If I give you a problem, simple problem, they should be able to solve. If I give 2 numbers addition, they should be able to do it at the second standard. That's it. They don't have to know abstract math and so on. So that's the first layer. So it's all about what is the problem and how to solve it. That's it. Right? Then the second layer has got to do now with the concept. So the example that I was also giving at the dinner table yesterday is, it's just like a driver knowing how to drive is the first layer, survival skill, if the driver has to find a job. In the second layer, at the second level, the driver should know what is under the hood in order to troubleshoot, in order to fix things, and to probably drive the vehicle efficiently and so on. So now you're going one layer deep and you're trying to understand the science, the grammar, the mechanics, whatever you want to call, language you want to use, of the underlying concept. So you move to concepts and the mechanics or the grammar of what is being learned. You should expect at least about 60% of your students to be in this layer. In my class, I don't expect 98%, 100% of people to be in this layer. Though, in fact, we have a set of grades, letter grades, and I tell them, if you're in the outer layer, you will certainly pass. In fact, I jokingly tell them, we work very hard to ensure that you pass. Okay, but you should not work hardly. Okay, so if you fail, that means you have really outperformed me, and I also congratulate you on that, but I cannot change the grade. But anyway, so we work very hard to ensure that the students pass. But now I tell the students, you decide, because this may be a course that you have taken out of no choice. So I don't expect you to be enthusiastic about every subject that you take. You earn your grade. And I tell them that learning is a word that has earning in it and not the other way around. So if you want to earn money or grade, first focus on learning, and then, like we said, AI is contained in brain, earning is also contained in learning. So they have to work harder. See, this is something that we have to communicate to our children. we don't tend to communicate this upfront on day 1 or day 2. We should tell our children what is the teacher's role, what is it that I will do, what is that I will expect, what is expected of them. If this is made very clear, then a lot of students do understand what it requires to do well. Otherwise, we start off saying this is the syllabus and these are the topics and so on. Kuch nahi hone wala, zyada kuch nahi hone wala. Okay, so then we go to the third layer, and you can see the volume of the sphere of the circle is shrinking, telling us that fewer and fewer fraction of the students in the class will be occupying this particular layer. So the third layer is where the learner transcends and is able to connect the context with the concept. That means I give you a problem that you're not so familiar with, but you're able to see the problem underneath and say, this is similar to what I've done, or I'm able to actually translate this. We talked about that. So you're able to formulate problem. I give you a real life problem, and you should be able to formulate it as a math problem, or whatever that problem is, right, pertaining to the subject. And you should be able to, in the driver example, the driver has transcended from driving, let us say, a Hyundai Swift or a Honda City to be able to drive any other vehicle. That is what it is, right? And that's a skill that not many drivers have necessarily. They'll be able to easily switch between vehicles and, in fact, go between cars to vans and so on, right? So you see the van and say, oh, I know the principle behind this. Although I've not driven this before, I can drive it now. This is the layer in which top students in your class will be and should be. And this is what you should define as, this is what I demand of students who want to do well. And this is what competitive exams are also demanding, right? So now the student slowly should decide where he or she wants to be, if you make it very clear. So I call this as the 3 layers as the student layer. That's it. So the journey of the student typically ends here, whether it is school or higher education. If the student has gone up to this layer, great. But now we are all teachers. So if we want to teach, we have to go beyond. And what is that beyond? We have to go to the 4th layer, which is what I call as responsible learning. Now you become very responsible as a teacher. As I said, as I keep saying, when we learn for ourselves, we are very forgiving if we don't understand a concept. But when we learn for teaching someone, we are not as forgiving, nowhere close, and should not be close to forgiving if we have made a mistake. It doesn't mean that, you actually start cursing yourself every time. All I'm saying is that we have to prepare so well, and we do that in order to communicate a concept. So we consult hundreds of resources for accuracy and depth, and we also think deeply how to communicate this, how to present this. That is where the real learning happens, and that is why when you talk to any teacher, whether it is school or higher education, they say, I learned it when actually I taught it. And that is true from my own personal experience as well. And finally, when you reach the 5th layer, which is the perspective where you have really transcended all the layers and now you're able to see the subject anywhere. So when I talk about control, I should be able to see it universally across all applications, not just in engineering. I should be able to see it in biology, economics, music, everywhere I should be able to see control. And that is when you enjoy the subject, you become one with the subject, you're experiencing bliss. Teachers really experience the bliss that a yogi actually experiences by being one with the divine. And that communion with the subject is something, that joy, inexplicable joy, but in that moments of joy, you can give a lot of gyan and help reach out to any audience and also let them experience the joy, some drops of joy that you are experiencing. If you have reached that stage, really you have really transcended all the layers, and this is what we should all strive to be in. Okay? So teachers have to go farther up to the 5th layer, and the first 3 are for both the student and the teacher. Now, how do we realign our assessment and evaluation with this thing? So as I said, in the first layer, we should, when we conduct our assessments, we should check what fraction of students simply know are in the first layer. That means they have the bare survival skills to pass the course. If this number is less than 98 or 97, then it is time to really worry and ask what happens. Why should I? What is happening? Who are the students who are being missed out? Why? And so on. And in the second layer, as I said, you should expect at least 60% of your class, and in the third layer, at least 30%. Of course, these are numbers that I have given. You don't have to, there is nothing sacrosanct about it. It's up to you. I know this was a point raised during our discussion at the dinner table yesterday. Ye sab to theek hai bhaiya. Now, who will tell the school management that this is acceptable? ठीक है, डंडा पड़ेंगे टीचर पर अगर ये टीचर लेके गया. But that is why I said early on, if there is a change that you make, doesn't matter whether you follow this philosophy or any other philosophy, the moment a change is being proposed, everybody else has to realign it. And there has to be a samanvay. Otherwise, it's not going to happen at all. So please, I say at the institute level, you do not expect miracles if you are not willing to actually change with the teacher. And that's exactly the point that was being emphasized in the morning talk. Right? Administrators, please allow the teachers to take a risk. You can also now map your questions, teaching, assignment questions, and so on. This is something, there was, when I attended DIDAC, there was a panel discussion, and one of the members in the audience asked one of the panelists, should homework problems be given? What is your thought? Should homework problems be given or not? Yes or no? आपका क्या राय है? How many people believe homework problems should be given? Why so little? अरे घर पर साधना करना is the most important thing in life. Doesn't matter whether it is music, math or English, it doesn't matter. घर पर कसरत करना is very, very important. Right? So, homework problems, see, somehow, sometimes we get too fancy and we say homework problems, students are under stress. I don't understand. Are in India, you tell me how many pressure cookers are being used. Pressure cooker के बगैर घर है, even झोपड़पट्टी will have. So without pressure, दाल कहाँ गलेगा? Don't give me this example, the student. What do you mean by? If a mother thinks about stress, will she deliver a baby? अरे चाहिए तो there is no gain without pain. The only thing is you have to see if it is being overdone, right? So if the mother is thinking, no, labor pain कौन जाएगा? Forget it. I'm not going to deliver. Bye bye. So yes, there are women like that, but by and large, mothers don't think about the pain. They think about the joy. So students have to go through. If you call it stress, they will call you stress. If you tell them this is kasrat like vyayam, they'll say it is. So I like the word exercises. Don't ask for questions. The correct word is exercises. Though you do physical exercise, you do mental exercise. So please do not stop giving homework problems. But don't give stupid homework problems. Go to shop, buy a chart, काटो, इस पर चिपकाओ. Absolutely useless homework problems. I tell you. Even the lizard, which we call chipkali, will be laughing at you. Okay. So the point that I'm trying to make is first have a deep philosophy about how you plan to teach, and then everything else has to be aligned, your assignments and so on. चिपकाने से कुछ भी नहीं. ये चिपकेगा, but वो नहीं चिपकेगी. Learner will not चिपको भाई. Okay, that's a problem. Okay. So please do give assignments, homework problems, but that are commensurate with the teaching, that are suitable for your class. And the good news is with AI, you can actually give a lot of personalized ones going forward, right? There was one of the awardees talked about impact of AI and so on. This is one of the positive outcomes. Okay, so of course, for the higher secondary and higher education, you can actually explain. At a primary school, it's hard to tell the kids what along with it. Parallel. बीच में advertisements भी आते हैं. My teacher doesn't give me any advertisement. So the child is physically present but mentally switched off and say, बाद में सीख लेंगे. Later on. This I call as deferred learning. And you know what later means? Okay? Later means never. So how do we address this problem? And there is a problem. Self-learning is a big issue and we have to all think about it. In our own ways, we have to think about how to train our children in whether it is ChatGPT, whether it is Swayamprabha, whether it is Khan Academy, Coursera, it doesn't matter. The moment I listen to some lecture or read a book, how do I assimilate? Students tend to think, if I read, I have learned. My son always used to tell me in his younger age, I would ask him, boss, पढ़ लिया क्या? Yes, I have read it. I said, I asked you whether you have learned, not whether you have read the book. Because for him, reading the book is amounting to learning. Math book bhi English book ki tarah padho. Science book bhi English book ki tarah padho. And then you have understood. So this is a problem that we have to really focus on. So we have to really train our children. And as I said, the system should accept whatever changes you are making. Okay, so this is a graphic that I wanted to pick up, to bring up, to highlight the big change in the education ecosystem that has happened over the years. See, when you look at the graphic here, I have two layers. There's a top layer, there's a bottom layer. The bottom layer always existed. The teacher and the learner and the societal conditions and the education policies have always dictated how this learning process happens. But today, especially in the last 10 years, there are three new players who have come. One is the open education resource, and I talked about one of the impact of that. Then, of course, you have the AI. And then you have the tech-enhanced learning. That means you have educational technology tools, simulation, and so on. I'm telling you, everybody, institute, teacher, parent, society, everybody has to realign in the wake of these three players who have come. How we realign, every institute has to think, but the common statement is we have to realign. And if we don't realign, that's it. You know, we are in deep, deep trouble, I'm telling you. And I'm not just referring to the knowledge, the skills of the knowledge, but I'm also referring to the impact that these three players have on the social and emotional learning things. See, in education, we talk about social and emotional learning. How my children, how my students are coming out with what is their mental strength. And I always say this, that we have moved away from a big joint family system to electronic family system, right? Whether you're traveling, whether you're at home, her mobile is your best companion. In fact, very soon you will see marriage alliances kuch nahi hai. Kis mobile ke saath kisko shaadi karna. That is all is going to happen. Okay. In fact, jokingly say, wife ho na ho, Wi-Fi to chahiye. Okay. So that is how it is. It's that bad. That is how bad the situation is today. So it's a very complex system at play, and we need to think. And I'm not claiming that I'll give you the solutions to that. So the other thing that I want to point out, by the way, how much time do you have? Because if you ask me to speak, I'll continuously speak. And you have no time display for me. That is another. Asha, I'll wrap up in 5 minutes? Yes, great. Arun, lovely, answering questions. I always say, when you take any of our scriptures, right? Any of our scriptures, whether it is Bhagavad Gita, whether it is Vishnu Sahasranama, whether it is Ramayana, Mahabharata, Upanishad, everything begins with a question. And the question, unfortunately, our students do not know the art of question. Despite the big heritage that India has, doesn't matter what your religion is, everybody has access to all of this. We do not know how to question. That is exactly the equivalent of prompt engineering in ChatGPT. We do not know what question to ask. This is problem number 1. Problem number 2, answer मिल गया तो answer समझने की qualification. Because children tend to think, I'll ask a question, why? Okay. I tell my children, you asked why. But if I answer, do you have the capacity to understand the answer? Don't expect me to simplify everything for you. I will have to use some language that you have to follow. Now, will you be able to? Then, no, then wait. wait. So if you want to learn how to solve an 8th standard problem and you're in 6th standard, wait until you go to 8th standard. Because experience is what is very, very important, right? So lovely, questions is lovely. Let me talk about another thing that all of us have to worry about. We cannot say, I am a teacher only for classroom. Gone are those days. You are a teacher for everyone, for yourself too. So we are going actually from classroom education, which is highly specialized, homogeneous set of learners. Of course, you can have heterogeneity if you're teaching to an international audience and so on, but highly controlled everything to large-scale education. You're going online, right? Every institution now wants to teach online, executive programs, etc. And we think we are ready. Of course, IIT Madras has been the leader in starting off online degrees and so on. They are still grappling with, trying to figure out what is the best way. We are still struggling to deal with classroom education. Here is another challenge, online. And that pressure will fall on every university today. I don't know about MGM. Is MGM also engaged in some online teaching or executive programs and so on? Right? So, तो अभी शहनाई थोड़ा बज रही है, right? बाद में बैंड बाजी. Okay. So there are so many challenges with large-scale education, and unless we learn how to deal with these, we will produce a lot more. I don't know. I don't know what is the word, but half-baked literates, and which are more dangerous than illiterates. So you have to be really careful. Okay. So how do we meet this challenge? But for me, I have had fantastic experience moving from classroom to large-scale education. Yes, it is very transforming. It is very transformative. It is demanding. It is challenging, but very rewarding. If you wait enough, you will get the reward. But you have to be really patient. You have to understand the challenges. You have to design your assessments, evaluations. You have to understand. And let me tell you, whenever anybody proposes an online program, kindly do not think of it as only online. You have to think of an online program. You have designed it such that it's a hybrid program. You have to ask the learners to come and meet at least once a month or once in 6 weeks or something like that. You should provide an avenue for that. If we do not provide an avenue, in the first schematic that I showed, there was one component called peer learning. That peer learning is just amazing. The peer learning really fills all the gaps that exist in the learning process between the teacher and the student. They learn better from their classmates than, in fact, many times students will say, oh, it is that simple, why the teacher made it so complicated? Correct? We have also said that as students, and when we become a teacher, we also do this. So, but it is great. So peer learning is very, very important. And education is not about learning the subject, learning to interact with people of different natures and dealing with uncertainties and so on. So when we design online programs, we have to keep many of the challenges in mind. But if we are patient, we design well, in the end, the rewards are made. Okay. So today, large scale means digital plus AI plus edutech. That is what it has now translated to, because that is the only way. If you want to reach out to thousands of learners, you have no other choice. Imagine that you are evaluating 1,000 students' assignments. No way you'll be able to do it. Mar jayenge aap. So you have to use AI tools. So the question is, how do you use them judiciously? Okay, so I just want to make 2 points and I'll conclude. One is, of course, as I've already said, training in self-learning. When you are thinking of designing online programs or even classroom, NEP says today, don't spoon feed them, एक bucket दे दो. Spoon में मत दो, पूरा concept bucket में डाल के दे दो. What is the expectation? The student will self-learn. How will the student self-learn if you don't train them in self-learning? So one solution that I have, quick solution is, you give 5 or 10 minutes of video, whether it is yours, somebody else made it, play it in the classroom. And then after that, you ask the students, you watch the video, and then you have a set of questions, or you ask orally, you will know how much they have learned. The more important thing is not for you, but for them to be aware that watching a video is not amounting to learning. that you still need a guided teaching. The guided teaching, students don't understand. They think that's what exactly happened in COVID. And I saw my son going through that. It hit when he was just finishing up his 9th and 10th and 11th. Until he wrote the half-yearly exam in person, he didn't realize that he has lost that guidance. He said, "Okay, Aram say there are so many videos I can watch." So this has been exactly the story of thousands of children across the country, that they thought watching videos is equal to self-learning. First, I think as a teacher, we should go through that experience. If I watch a video, what is it that I learn? So we have to put ourselves in the position of the student and then give that manual out. So please focus on this. And I don't mind universities actually offering courses on self-learning. Doesn't matter, 1 credit, 2 credit, बच्चों को पहले सिखाओ कि self-learning क्या होता है. Otherwise, they are absolutely lost. Okay, and that involves, of course, a lot of steps, but I'm not going to go over that. Okay, so one of course is the flipped classroom model. I'm going to skip this. If there is a question, we'll talk about it. I'll end with talking about using AI effectively, and part of it was already spoken by one of the awardees. So, what is the see? Please remember this. In fact, I was just mentioning this to Monica ji. The goals of learning and education do not change. The means only change. So, we should not be afraid that AI aa gaya, that means I have to completely, change the teaching goals. No, the teaching goals are still the same. The tools are different. When the Blackboard to PowerPoint came in, there was a huge reluctance. Then when offline to online came, there was a huge reluctance. Now, abhi AI aaya, there is a huge reluctance. No. See, let me give you one example. As all of us know, when it comes to Vedas, it was all by listening only for a very, very long time. Vedas, it is all Shruti. It's just listening. But Vedavyasa realized, AI aayega, sab kuch aayega. And documentation, patenting, sab kuch aayega. Let me write it down. Because the ability to listen and learn is not going to be the learners of Caligula. So did he change? The Jagat Guru has changed, then we should also change the way we teach. That's all. That's a simple example for us to understand that the means of teaching and learning are changing, but the goals are not. And it is in that perspective we have to see AI. I'm just going to touch base on a few points, not all of them. For example, when you take large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Bard, and so on, use them effectively to set up review questions, set up assignments, set up rubrics. Use it and show in the class that you have used it, so that they say, my teacher is not outdated. Many children talk about the teacher, we all know behind our backs, ye teacher is old time, kuch nahi aata hai, phone bhi unlock karna nahi aata hai, and so on, right? So, the moment you say that I am with the flow, then the students make a connect with you and say, wow, teacher tech savvy hai. You curate some of the videos and say, these videos I have curated for you. मैं जो पढ़ा रही हूँ, उसके अलावा you please see this so that you will get the complementary knowledge. So you have done a lot of homework and they see that. And they will now go with you. They'll say, teacher, if I want to learn something, what is a video? I will tell you. So that means now they are not exploring on their own. Okay? So use large language models effectively and adopt hybrid learning, right? And of course, please introduce curriculum level changes. Please think of AI, data science as, and especially at higher education institutions, as a math and science course, as a default thing. But you have to integrate it carefully. But it is inevitable. And the other point is, let us teach ethics, because the moment they use some technology, they should know how to acknowledge it. Very, very important. You saw in the morning how the speaker acknowledged everything. And very importantly, infrastructural changes have to be made. Again, this is reflective of what I said. One change calls about change in one component, calls for change in all the other components. Okay, so I'll stop at this point, and I just want to end with one thing. A lecture is worth 1,000 reads. This is what we have to remember. A picture is worth 1,000 words. That is, as a teacher, I can show a graphic and convey a lot more. If you're having access and you can use simulations, edutech technologies and so on to simulate, to generate virtual experiments, karo, class mein karo, I do that all the time. It is worth 1,000 lectures. One simulation, one experiment is worth. So, a healthy blend of technology, analogies, similitudes, theory and practice is what makes a complete package. You will have to figure out which ingredient, I mean you have to use these ingredients, but kis matra mein you will have to figure out. Just like you're cooking a new dish. Not all dishes have the same composition of ingredients, but it is very important to use all these ingredients in the best way possible. And in fact, many a time I don't use PowerPoint at all, nothing. I just go to the board and start with the chalk and do it. And students love that too. I enjoy that. So we should explore, experiment, but you have to be really connected with yourself, with the subject and with the students. That is very, very important. Okay, thank you very much. I hope I didn't take too much of the time. Sure.
So I can read out the question.
Yeah, please.
So this question is, it says, is it appropriate to grade students as advanced learners and slow learners after assessment? And recently this teacher is saying that some students came to me and they were classified as slow learners and they were feeling very depressed about it. So how can we cope up with this issue in assessments?
Oh, very, very good question, very relevant. There are two angles to it. First of all, I'll answer that first question, whether we should label. I would probably disagree. In fact, I'll go back to the Panchakosha and say, I'll tell them which layer you are. Whether you are right now able to understand the concept only, I mean, you are able to solve the problem only, or you have gone beyond and understood the concept and so on. So, they know exactly what skill level is required rather than the pace of learning. Let the student figure out. See, sometimes the so-called slow learners can pick up. We never know because humans are very, very complex people. The moment they set their intention, they can change their rate of learning. So it is better not to label them. The second angle to that is today's learner is very sensitive to hundreds of things. Okay, because they have not interacted with many people, so they do not know how to take Tana or even a small, big label like this, advanced and slow. So better be culturally sensitive to it and rather be very objective. That is
sure, sir. This is how to evaluate, assess and accreditate the communication and creative abilities, competencies and achievements or outcomes in students, especially in humanities, particularly English language, if you could throw light on that.
Okay, I'm not an expert, I've never taught English, I use a lot of English. Humanities, yes, is different. See, let me give you a very generic answer and see if you can customize it for humanities. Any subject that I teach, the first thing that I should ask is, what are the learning outcomes? If I actually declare that very openly to myself and to the student, for my students, every lecture I tell them, what is it that I expect you to learn after this lecture? And if you have put up those and some of these which are measurable, then you go ahead and do it. So for English, it may be that you are looking at the ability to write, a very crisp way of a very long, crisp form of a long paragraph, what we call as précis writing. Or you may want to check on grammar. Or spontaneity. You give a topic, they are able to write. So there are so many different demands of a language or a humanities course. I'm just taking English as an example. Everything depends on your learning outcomes, and the sutra is you tie your learning outcomes with your assessments and evaluation, and then everything will go smooth. That is all.
So what can be the initiatives taken by the teachers at school level in making the students understand the questions and help them prepare a smart answer? By smart answers, I mean good enough to explain the theories, phenomena, rather than writing answers in about 10 lines and so on and so forth.
Very good. Yeah, this is, see, yatha training, tatha expectation you should have.
Yes.
Okay. before expecting your student to do that, have you trained? So what we all should do is, whether it is school or higher education, a part of the class occasionally should be spent on whatever I expect my students to explicitly learn. So with respect to the specific question, if I am expecting my students to understand the question, then frame your question. You write a question and say, the purpose is not to answer the question, the purpose is to explain the question. Have you ever asked any student to explain the question? We always ask, solve the question, answer the question. No, explain the question. Number one. Number two, tell me what the concepts are. In fact, in my surprise quizzes at IIT, sometimes I have questions, I don't want you to solve it. You have to tell me what concepts go into solving this question. And sometimes it may be more than one concept. Oh, kafi hai. I don't want a very long solution, nothing. I don't want you to solve it. Just tell me if you're able to connect this question with the concepts. Because these are the bridges that they find very difficult to cross, the barriers. Once they know two things, what the question is asking for, what are the concepts, right? Then they can apply. They are on their way. This is where we have to really train them. So please reframe your questions along this. They'll be very happy. I don't have to solve this problem. But they will get real joy out of it.
True. This is a very interesting question.
Sure.
So they're saying, sir, you're a chemical engineer.
Oh.
Your topic today that you're addressing is related to data and AI, which is computer science.
Correct.
And you're giving presentation on academics. And you're also referring to the spiritual element as scriptures. So, which is actually a real example of multidisciplinary approach, so which we always talk about. So will you elaborate and explain the relevance of multidisciplinary approach?
Excellent. Very good. I know many people have asked this question. In fact, many people have also raised doubts, not just asked questions. Are you really qualified for it? I'm always reminded of a beautiful saying that Swami Vivekananda has. You start with anything in this creation and start asking questions, you'll reach God. So I can start with this remote. And then if I ask suitable questions, one day I will reach God. I will experience God. Okay? The question is whether you're asking questions. Okay? So the answer to that is, yes, my training as a BTech student was in chemical engineering. But I never confined myself to that. In fact, I said chemical engineering, I'm here because of my JEE rank. That's all. Okay? It was not necessarily my choice. My love was in math, control, and so on. And control being an interdisciplinary subject naturally led me to all the other allied disciplines, electrical engineering, aerospace, and so on. So I said, I will grow. So it is like this. You are, as a beginner, you are here, and this is your horizon. This is your vision. As you rise, you see a bigger land. As you rise further, you will see bigger. Not only do you get to see larger realms, but you see the connections. And the moment you start seeing the connections, as I said in the Panchakosha, you are slowly entering the fifth layer, right? And you are nothing is actually a boundary for you. You are able to connect and so on. Of course, this is all certainly, and nothing, I don't take credit for this. It is all because of my Guru and Mahasaraswati. That's it. So I wouldn't say it is because of me. The only thing that we all need to have is the sankalp. That is why I always feel when we do our prayers and pujas, the first thing they say is pehle sankalp karo. That is the beauty of the sankalp. You just have to have the intention. Nothing is actually going to stop you. So that is all. It's just the passion and the intention, the strong intention that God has gifted, and then the ways actually emerged. That is how it evolved. I don't have a formula for this, but the root is in your sankalp. That's all.
So we'll take a couple more because we are short on time, but I have quite a few left. So maybe over tea we can discuss the rest.
Yeah, sure.
So the next is, how can there be a synergy between teaching and assessment?
Oh, that synergy is extremely important. How can there be a synergy? That synergy has to be there. So if I'm teaching you how to solve a bunch of linear equations, right? Then first I have to teach how to solve a linear equation and then test whether what I have taught has been understood. So it has to happen interactively. You'll have to interact with the class. It cannot be like after 3 weeks or something that I do. In fact, in many of my classes, I ask my students to come and solve on the board. See, the only thing I know in schools, as I was saying, teachers are on a goda called syllabus completion. Okay, we don't sit on such godas. We have autonomy. We say that at higher education, छोड़ो यार, एक concept नहीं पढ़ाया तो नहीं पढ़ाया, no big deal. But whatever I have taught as a student actually understood. If you are willing to sacrifice a bit of a time on that, then you will spend time on assessment. In fact, it is plain. You teach and then you assess, either in this class or the next class. But that synergy is exactly established when you first frame the questions with which you will teach them, and then you give them a similar looking question. First, that thing has to be established. So first ask, what is the methodology of teaching that you will adopt, and what are the objectives, and then you again go back and evaluate, assess. So this is the way. Sometimes it will be oral, sometimes it will be giving them some time, but that is the key to really bring about a synergy. Some things have to be done offline, some things have to be done online. But you'll have to do that. Like, I mean, I thought it is a very obvious thing that whatever you teach, but break it up into small concepts, little concepts, and then keep testing. Don't assess them on a big bulk of concepts. Otherwise, it will be tough for you to diagnose also.
Thank you so much. We are going to take a short break after this session. So Mr. Ganesh, Mrs. Madhuri Kulkarni, Dr. Shazia, and Dr. Rashmi Achmare, you can interact with sir during the break. Yeah, thank you so much for the responses, sir.